So I just got this Mobula 6 bind and fly in the mail the other day, and I need to set it up. So I thought I'd make a little video sort of going through the process of how to do that. So if you're interested in learning how to set up a bind and fly quad, I think this will be helpful for you. So in order to do that, well, there's a few things we're going to need. Of course, you're going to need your quad that you're going to want to set up. In this case, it's my little Mobula 6. But this will be the same if you bought a larger 3 or 5 inch quad that's a bind and fly. You will need to have Betaflight installed on your computer to be able to do this. And you're going to also need to have your radio goggles or like a desk monitor like this so you can check that the video is working. And of course, you know, the USB cable that's correct for whatever plug happens to be on the flight controller for your quad. Now, I'm going to assume that you understand on your own radio how to add a new model and get it set up so that it's talking with the transmitter. I'm not going to go through that step. Everybody has a different radio with a slightly different system installed on it. So once you get that established on your own radio, there are really only 3 things that we kind of need to do. We're going to need to bind the new model to our radio and then make sure that it's set up correctly with the switches and the sticks. We'll check the motors to make sure that they're doing what we need them to do. Then we'll need to make sure that our video system is working. We can connect to the goggles. And then the last one here is just sort of optional. We can change little settings that are making it a little bit more personal to our own style and our own use. So let's get into this right away. We're just going to jump into Betaflight. Let me do that. I'll switch over here to Betaflight. I'm going to attach my quad and we'll see what happens here. And there we go. It jumps right in, connected to Betaflight straight away. Now, when you connect to Betaflight, typically you're just going to go directly to the setup tab, and one of the things I'm going to do right away is just calibrate the accelerometer because that's right on this page. So I'm just going to put my little quad here on a really level surface, come up and hit calibrate accelerometer, and it will do its thing, and that's done. Okay, now really what we're going to need to do is connect the quad to our radio. And to do that, we'll go here to the receiver. And if you can see down here at the bottom, there's a button that lets us bind the receiver. So we're going to use that and the bind feature that's inside of our radio at the same time. So I'm using Express LRS, so I'm going to go into the script for Express LRS. If my radio will let me. There we are. I've got a bad button on my radio here that doesn't like to cooperate. So now I'm going to put my radio into bind mode. If the button will cooperate. Yeah, it just doesn't want to cooperate, does it? There we go. And I'll bind here. And we're good. Now you can see if I move the sticks, nothing is happening. So let's try that. I didn't bind. So binding, bind the receiver. Now it's working. There we are. It seems to be bound. And so that's a pretty straightforward, simple process. Now what we do need to do, however, is make sure that the sticks are doing what we want them to do. So just do a quick check with your roll that it's going the right way, your pitch that it's doing the right thing, the yaw, and that your throttle is going up and down. Now on your radio you probably have different switches. You can see that some of them are active on my radio, and that's really what I want. Okay, so the binding worked and that part is clearly working. So we've done this, we've made sure that our sticks are correct. And so now what we want to do is set up our aux modes. And when it comes from the factory, your quad doesn't know which switches that you want to use for arming your quad or for doing other features on it. So what we'll do is we'll come here in Betaflight to the Modes tab. And you can see that there are different modes that are already set up here. We've got an arm, there's an angle mode, there's a flip over after crash. And for me also, I like to add in a pre-arm. So I'm going to, up here, I allowed myself to see the modes that aren't being used. I'm going to come down. I know it's closer to the bottom. I don't know exactly where. If you can see the word pre-arm, you could tell me. Oh, there it is right there. So I'm going to add a range. Now you can see that it's a new option here for me to use. I'm just going to hide the ones that I don't use. And now what I'm going to do is assign the switches that I like to these different features. So for arming, I like to use my 2-position switch. So I'll just choose that. So that's where I like it to be when it's armed. For the angle mode, which I don't really use, I'll just use this particular switch here, which is my aux 3. And I don't, with a small quad like this, I don't like to use the flip over crash. It's hard on the ESCs. And so for me on this quad, I'm going to turn it off. But if you have a larger quad and you want to use your flip over after crash, just assign the correct switch for that. Like I said, I like to use a pre-arm, so I'm going to use my momentary switch as my pre-arm, and I'll set that up so that when the switch is up, the pre-arm will be active. Now I need to come down and hit save to make sure that these are all good. This is going very slowly. You can see that the different switches are doing what I would like them to do. So that's really good. Going back in here, the last thing we would do just really quickly would be to check just for our own knowledge about the motors. I'm going to come over here and we can see that, pardon me, on this one, the motors are set to spin the props out. And that's good to know so that when I'm going to fly it, I'm making sure that I'm putting my props on the correct orientation. If the quad is set up to have props out, make sure that you set your props to spin that direction on your quad when you put them together. So that really is not something we need to change. That's just for our own information. All right. So basically, we have now bound the radio and done this basic setup, and that's working. The next thing we need to do is connect to the goggles and make sure that the video system is working. So I happen to have just a little desk monitor like this, so I'm going to use that. Of course, it doesn't want to start for me. Let's see, the batteries are being persnickety, I think. There we are. Okay. And so you've got your goggles, you've got them turned on. What you're going to do is we'll go into the Betaflight. We're going to come down to the video transmitter. Okay. And what we're going to do is make sure that it is on the channel and the band that we like. Now I happen to be on B and 4, and I'm giving it 25 milliwatts of power as a test, and I can save that. And then if I go and look at my video, I can see that it's working. It's got a bit of flicker, but that's fine. So that is really good. We know that the video is working. And now we just want to check our on-screen display, which we will find right above it. And what we can do is go through and take away or remove the items that we don't use very much. So for me, with this little whoop, I don't need an artificial horizon. I don't need the sidebars. I don't care about the craft name or the crosshairs. This is a tiny whoop which certainly does not need anything about GPS on it. So I'm going to turn those off. And a link quality I'll keep there. Throttle position, I'm not so concerned about. I've got a timer and the warnings. Now, that's what I'm going to set it up. Of course, you would choose whatever elements that you want to display on your on-screen display and move them around however you want them so that it looks how you need it to look. And just make sure you always hit save down here at the bottom. Now, the very last things would be to do any kind of personalization or minor tweaking that we want to do. Okay, and so to do that, there aren't really many things that we want to do. So we're going to come here to configuration. One of the things that we can do is just change the name of the model if we want. So type in whatever you'd like. I like to make sure that the arming angle is 180 degrees so that it doesn't matter which orientation the quad is in, it will arm. And that's very nice. And then basically everything else on here, make sure your on-screen display is turned on or you won't see the things in your goggles. Basically everything else on here you can just leave. And make sure again you save and reboot. Now, the last two things that maybe you would want to take a look at would be in the presets and the PID tuning. Now with a bind and fly quad, I would sort of at the beginning recommend not messing with the presets. It should come from the factory with a good preset tune built into it. Later, after you've flown for a while, you might want to come in here and start playing around with a few things, but in the beginning, I would just leave it. And that would be the same with the PID tuning. A bind and fly quad should come from the factory with a pretty decent factory tune on it. Now, in time, you may need to change that to suit your own flying and styles and needs. So there really isn't anything to change here. However, in the rate profile, it will come with basically stock Betaflight rates. And so you may want to consider inputting rates that are more what you're typically flying. So I'm just going to boost these up to sort of a rotation rate that I'm more comfortable with at 900. But since I never fly whoops, this is like one of my very first ones ever, I'm going to leave the center sensitivity in the expo like this for now and just fly it a bit and see what it feels like and then come back and change these. But these ones are very personal, and so they'll become what you want, pardon me, and so you'll end up setting them how you want them to be. But regardless of that, whenever you're done, come down here and hit save. Okay, and basically, from now, you are able to plug your quad in, put on your goggles, and go for a flight. Everything that we have done is now established that the quad is ready, and we're ready to go. So I'm just going to disconnect from Betaflight here, and if you have found this video to be helpful, I'm glad that you did, and perhaps you'd like to subscribe and continue watching some other ones in the future. But for now, thanks for watching, and I hope you get out there and have some good flying. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you another time.